Firemen who were prepared to put the effort into the job, and that engine wouldn't perform. I mean, it all started with a heap of coal and a shovel.
This looked like a road map, but it showed the network of railroads before so many were axed in the 1960s. This line joined two Bs, Bath and Bournemouth, with a little branch line to a third B, Burnham-on-Sea, change at Evercreech Junction. The independent Somerset and Dorset Joint Railway was important because it connected the industrial Midlands and the northwest with the south coast. But it always felt like a local family enterprise, and in that intimate atmosphere lay the seeds of its own destruction. Some unkindly called the S&D the slow and dirty. It was slow, forever switching back and forth between double and single lines. And it was dirty, steam-powered to the very end. But it took you to the seaside. Its grandest train was the Pines Express. The men who coaxed those steam engines up the steep gradients and over the Mendip Hills were the kings of their iron roads and of a closed world, the locomotive footplate. This film is about two of them, and it's also, therefore, about all of them. Their locomotives may have appeared dumb iron monsters, but to the railwaymen they were living creatures, and in the hands of an expert driver like Donald Beale, a bulldog could become a greyhound. Teamed up with his young fireman, Peter Smith, and a good locomotive, he was the master of his craft.
You had your faith in the engine. I often spoke to them when I was going along, you know. I know the old girl would do it. She'll do it. Talk to her, come on, old girl, and although it was a bit dicey at times, we used to get through with it. We used to look forward to going to work. Each turn was different. We never had two trips the same.
The footplate men of the S&D were the legendary heroes of the train spotters, people like Mike Arlett. Today, he's laid on a reunion, courtesy of the Midhants Railway Preservation Society. Donald Beale, Peter Smith, and the Pines Express working together again. But the harsh reality of the footplate can never be recaptured. Physically hard and often downright dangerous.
Whenever we went in the tunnel, your handkerchief went into a bucket of water. You had it over your mouth to keep as much cold air as you could.
And I was on the floor already.
He was on the floor already. And when she slipped, I tried to shut the regulator, but she started priming at the same time. Now you can imagine that, working full out, the blast from the exhaust hitting the roof of the tunnel about 12 inches above, and the exhaust fumes from the whole of that firebox of an incandescent fire. You could feel the heat tingling your skins, and when you breathed, it was like swallowing, as Pete said, hot pokers.
And of course, when she slipped, it wasn't in half-hearted fashion.
All you could see outside of the cab was a falling red-hot cinders.
It's raining down over the engine. It was fantastic. Dante's Inferno. And just to finish finally, when we got to Midford, where we had to stop to release the brakes on the train, which was my job, but of course the firebox was virtually empty then, because all this lot had been cascaded out of the chimney, you see, back in...
So you had to start all over again, did you?
Well, actually, again, Donald came to my rescue. While I went back to release the brakes, Donald was there, you know, filling up the firebox again. I mean, because both of us were, you know, in quite a poor state. We were wheezing dreadfully, you know, with the fumes on our chest.
These days, we can all get much closer to the stars of steam, like this massive rebuilt West Country class Pacific locomotive. And the crew are more approachable too.
Could you sign the book for me, please, Peter?
Yes, certainly.
The interest in railways seems to be as intense now as ever it was. When the Preservation Society is keeping the steam engine alive, it's a thing that could go on forever. When I joined the railway, I knew what I was in for. I knew I had to work every holiday. I knew I had to work nights, early mornings. I thought, well, that's it. I'll accept it. So I started. August Bank Holiday 1919. I never had no inclination much before then for being a railwayman, but once you got into the shed and the smell of the steam, smoke, paraffin, it sort of got into you. And then with the talking in the mess rooms and watching the other drivers and firemen doing their work, you gradually began to get that ambition that one day I wanted to be a driver. When you were running along, you knew you were in charge of the whole job. And if you had a good fireman, like I was fortunate to have with Peter in later years, it was a pleasure to come to work. You had to have your eyes outside, and your nose was constantly, is that the smell of a pop again? Your ears would catch perhaps a squeak, you know, something's dry out there, or perhaps a psst of a piston gland beginning to blow. All your senses were keyed up as you went along, even your feet, if you went over a rail joint and it dipped a little bit. Your interest was sustained all the time. Yeah, I remember working excursion to Bournemouth. And I thought to myself, oh, what a lovely job this is. I'm going down to the Bournemouth and I'm getting paid for it going down there. Oh, it was a dirty job, and you were black with the soot and then the cold would stick. But it was all in the job. We never took a lot of notice of it.
Does it feel the same or different?
Just the same as ever.
Yes. Can you imagine yourself somewhere between Bournemouth and Bath now?
Yes, and I wish I was doing the whole trip.
You wish you were?
Yeah, you feel the motion through the floorboards the same.
And what sort of things will you be looking out for now, Donald?
Anything out the normal. You look out to see that your line's clear. You look for children or obstacles on the track. You've got to get the train into the destination on time and the passengers walking safely away. Yeah. That's all our job is.
And what about when you got to a steep bank? How did you manage to maintain speed? What did you have to do?
Well, that was Peter's job. We work as a team.
Yes.
I use the steam that Peter creates with good firing. A good fireman, he never wastes coal. He doesn't waste steam blowing off at the safety valve. He gets the steam pressure right up to the red mark, and I use it as economically as I can. When I get to a steep bank, I drop the gear down and open the regulator a bit more, yeah, to supply more steam to the pistons.
And were these good engines to work on, these Bully Pacifics? Did you like them?
I like the original West Country best. West Country's was the female of the species. She had a nice green dress on, and she was light and dancing on her feet, and if you spoke to a 9, you got a woof, woof. But if you spoke to a West Country, chifferty, 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 that's all she whispered to you. She never had a real bark on her. Put her up in society on first-class coaches or passenger train, and she was in her element, but she didn't like getting her hands dirty on coal trains or anything like that. No, she was a lady of the locomotives.
If the West Country class was a lady, the Class 9F was a bruiser, designed to take steam into the 80s, built for freight and fast enough for the Pines Express, ironing out the mendip gradients without the need for doubling up. It's 2,000 horsepower, enough to make a fleet of today's motorway juggernauts redundant. Perhaps the roads were not going to have it all their own way after all. On the Somerset and Dorset, they saw the 9Fs as their saviour. But even the 9Fs couldn't save the line. Government policy was one juggernaut that couldn't be stopped. This was Evercreech Junction. Today, the pace of change has overtaken it, and Evercreech has lost its junction. The station master's house was sold, and the old track bed, which Donald Beale travelled for over 40 years, lies somewhere under the front lawn. It wasn't simply that for the accountants, double-heading the locomotives on the Somerset and Dorset was inefficient. Jointly run by the Southern and LMS, it was always a smut in the eye of the mighty Great Western Railway. When its successor, British Rail's Western Region, got control of the S&D, closure was inevitable. By 1966, it was gone. Exactly 20 years later, Mike Arlett and Peter Smith set out to walk its southern section. It was like looking for a grave in a deserted churchyard, and half expecting to see a ghost. This signal box governed the web of lines at Temple Combe, which was the junction of the Southern Railway's line to Waterloo and the Somerset and Dorset. It could be a shunter's nightmare here, and passengers needed the patience of Job. But the civil servants had none to spare. Today, there's hardly a trace of Temple Combe Junction to be seen. The old Slow and Dirty wasn't just closed. Within months, it was systematically wiped off the face of the landscape. But it was only part of a nationwide orgy of destruction. 5,000 miles of track ripped up and thrown on the scrap heap. Now only the southern line survives here, but through this arch you could once enjoy a view of rural England as the S&D took you to the seaside.
Now there was scenery from Sturminster Newton down over the River Stour, and in the summer the boats paddling up and down the river. A lovely scene. In fact, the whole line was all countryside. We never ran through a built-up town at all.
Will be a stopping train to Bournemouth calling at Penn Street, Stourbridge, Sturminster Newton, Shillingstone, Blandford, Ladygate, Broadstone,
Temple Combe, Sturminster Newton, Stourbridge, Shillingstone, to Blandford. Yes, it was a marvellous scenic railway.
The only sizable town on the route was Blandford Forum, busy Blandford, now off the railway map. Little boys will soon be saying to their fathers, "What's that, Dad? Was it a castle or a church or something?"
That's been left, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I wonder for what reason. There must be something behind it. Of course,
Every night I lay in bed and visualise some part or another. Yeah. That's where the knowledge of the road came in. You had a mark for every signal on the road. Perhaps at Sturminster, an iron bridge. You're running into Blandford, there's an iron bridge. The rattle of that iron bridge would, I know where, 50 yards ahead, there's a home signal up in the bank. And another time you'd get a rock bottom in the track and you get a rrrr as you went over it, and the overbridge where you dive under, and they all register in your mind and tell you exactly where you were to. And going over the same road day in, day out, year in, year out for 30, 40, 50 years, you began to know it.
I was just a schoolboy, a sort of train spotter when I first met Donald. He was always approachable, and you know, ideally wanted to get up on the footplate and frighten to ask drivers, but Donald sort of sensed it and said, "Want to come out, son?"
Yeah.
And that really started the friendship. And it wasn't long before I was invited to his home. And it was really Donald who got me my job on the railway. You know, he sort of organised it that I should turn up on the appointed day and see somebody, you know, and he would arrange it all for me.
Yeah.
But of course, what couldn't be arranged was that I would be his fireman at some stage during my career. And yet the sort of miracle happened, really, that I was just promoted. And I was then Donald's fireman in about 1958. The footplate environment is compounded of sort of heat, dirt, violent movement, and nothing is achieved without hard physical effort. The West Country Pacific, for example, the great area on one of those is about 38.5 square feet. So we're talking about 40 domestic fireplaces, if you like. So probably you could shovel during your 8 or 9 hour shift something in the order of 6 to 8 tons, depending on the load and how the engine was worked. And it's all done on a moving platform, and when you're travelling at 60 to 70, 80 miles an hour, it takes quite a bit of time really to get your sea legs, really, I suppose. The fireman was also responsible for the injectors, just feeding water into the boiler. He also had to make sure that he was disengaged from firing to assist his driver in sighting signals. And generally, he wasn't just a cold shoveler, there was more to the job than that. And if it was done well, it was a real craft, and it was, well, I thought it was lovely to watch when a fireman did his job well. It all stemmed down really to physical effort, skill, and a feeling for the locomotive that you were working on. Footplate work is teamwork, really, and Donald and I worked as a very good team. As a driver, Donald was a marvellous chap to work with. Because in fact, drivers had it in their power to make life very hard for firemen. But Donald respected his firemen, and I think just about every fireman who ever worked for Donald respected him.
In the old days, the old driver, he was an uncrowned king, and some of them wouldn't speak to you all day. And, sometimes if you would be firing a bit, and if they thought you were putting a bit too much on, they'd simply kick the shovelful all over the footplate. That's what made a lot of us think, well, if I ever get the chance to be a driver, I'll treat my mate different than that. But they were some old so-and-sos in my early days. And there's nothing to beat it. I mean, you're on the engine, aren't you? You're your own boss. Pete and I, you're on our own boss, and nobody can come up and say, do this, do that, or the other. We can simply say, get off the footplate.
Yeah.
But as long as you kept your nose clean, done your job properly, you never saw a boss from one year's end to another.
Was that the main appeal of the job then, the fact that you were your own boss all the time?
No, it was open air.
Was it?
Yes, you were out in open air all day long. You saw every season.
Yeah.
The snow in the winter, the primroses in the spring, the summer. Pete and I, we had many a struggle up over the Mendits, and sometimes the harder the job, and the more we had to struggle, the more pleasure we got at the end of the day, knowing that we got through. And
what was it, a sense of achievement of actually beating the elements?
If you were on early turn, say 2:45 now or the 3:30 goods, you took your breakfast with you, and as and when the occasion arose, you were back in the siding, right? 5-10 minutes. You simply set that to and fried up. How about the shovel where you get the sausages?
All right, well, I'll come on top of it then. You got it, Donald?
Yeah.
Right.
There you Shake them over, Keith.
There you go.
Lovely gravel. Get this on a nice frosty morning, and the smell gives you an appetite better than what you had before. And in the summer months, if you were in a shunting yard with the fields on either side, like at Evercreech Junction North, fireman would nip off the engine into the field. About 5 minutes up and down, he'd come back with his cap full of mushrooms. And into the pan they went. And the shunters would be in the cabin having their breakfast, and we'd sit on the engine and enjoy our fry-up.
We're going to go for a couple of bits of fried bread, didn't we?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Turn them over, they look lovely and brown, Keith.
I think this is the only piece of S&D rail still in situ between Bath and Broadstone.
Well, I didn't think there was any, so that's something I've learned.
Oh, there you are, look. And I would imagine this is part of the old signal box.
Signal box, yeah.
Anyway, you were interested.
We got to know them over the years, you know, and Charlie, Tom, Dick or Harry, and you never knew them all by surname, but that's the way we used to work with each other. It was very nice too. And it was the same with the permanent waymen. All right, if I ride through the Shillingston with me this morning, driver, come on, Charlie, come on up. And hello, Don or Peter. There was no, I'm the driver and you're the porter or anything like that. You know, it was a family affair all round.
The person that here was a victim of the tragedy of this situation. You know, if they'd tried, shall we say, improving the service or some form of dieselisation or better advertising or just something, you know, to try and improve things.
Yeah.
But nobody tried. It was just left to rumble on, and the feeling was that they wanted it to close.
They did. The man who wielded the famous axe, Dr. Beeching, said years later, "People ask me now if I'm sorry I closed so many branch lines, but I'm not. I wish we'd been able to close more."
He was in the chemical industry, ICI, soap powders and detergents. Yeah. Instead of electrifying the railways, he electrocuted them.
It all happened at such speed, and to people like Donald Beale, who didn't live in a world full of unemployment and redundancies.
I felt then like the old coach drivers must have felt when the railways came in, that we were being wiped out and a new form of transport was coming in. When I went up on the last day practically, I was ashamed to be on the railway. It had gone rack and ruin, wicked really. But no, it's all gone, and all gone by road. When I started, a railwayman, he was looked up to because he had a job for life. He was never laid off short. And as the 20s rolled on and the slump years came, he was looked up to more than ever. Oh, he works on the railway, he's all right. He would start as a porter, cleaner, and finish up in the general manager's chair. And the thing is now, you can start on the railway, you can rise up so far, and and then there's a brick wall. You can't go beyond that. That's for the boys to come in from the universities.
Because here we're coming out to Broadstone Junction, and what's it, 63.5 miles from Bath it used to be.
And where was the actual station then?
It was just down here. You can see in the distance the Broadstone Hotel, and the station was just to the right of that.
And that was the end of the S&D?
That was the end of the S&D.
Soon, even the main line, which the S&D joined here at Broadstone Junction, would be torn up. Peter Smith abandoned his boyhood dream and left the railway. Donald would soon retire, but before the team was broken up, he had a parting gift for Peter up his sleeve. The chance to drive the very last Pines Express with Evening Star, the last steam engine built by British Rail.
He worked the last Pines. And any man that can take a Class 9 up over the Dorset, unassisted with 12 bogies and 450 ton behind for a start, got to know his job.
I'd driven the Pines with Donald in attendance on several occasions, but this was the first time when I was in charge, and it's a different matter, because when I was driving, I could always look over to Donald for a bit of support, but when you're in charge and he's not there and the other lad is looking at you, there's a different feeling altogether. It had to be the high point of my railway career, and Donald said to me, you go and drive that train on Saturday. He said it would be something, he said, that you will always remember throughout your life, and of course it is. I was just 24.
Yeah, because I knew we could do it as well as what I could do it, and I never had no qualms about it, and it meant more to Pete than it did to me.
Thousands of people from the mill towns of the northwest and from the city of 1,000 trades, Birmingham, got their first glimpse of the sea here. On summer Saturdays, trains loaded with happy holidaymakers poured into Bournemouth from all directions, while last week's visitors went home. By through trains to Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, Cleethorpes and Sheffield, they wound their way back up to Somerset and Dorset. The railway today stops just short of its old destination and is no more than a siding on the end of a marshalling yard. Bournemouth West Station itself has its own commentary on all that's gone before. It's a road and a car park.
Steam was entirely different. You could sort of mould steam. You get back, you were proud of what you'd done. You discuss it with your colleagues. You know, we took 500 tons up Parks and Bank today or something, and say, did you? They would relate that to physical effort. They could sort of sense what you've been through. There was this sort of comradeship.
I'm one of 11 in my family, and I'm the only one that dirtied my hands. Yeah. I hope if the good Lord sends me back down on earth again, I can start on S&D as a cleaner again. I shouldn't want nothing else.
Please visit our website for news about new productions that are on the way, and you can support my work on my Patreon page. Thank you.